Ethan Cole had scarcely set foot on Orbital Research Station Epsilon-7 when a sense of both foreboding and wonder washed over him. The cylindrical hull of the station gleamed with a subdued silver sheen. An older, time-worn relic sat adrift near the restless boundary where Earth's jurisdiction gave way to uncharted cosmic dominions. The corridor lights flickered softly, humming with subdued energy, as though echoing the subtle tension that existed among the station's inhabitants. He clutched a small duffel bag brimming with technical gear, took a tentative step forward, and allowed the humming door to slide shut behind him. Epsilon-7 was old, older than many of its sister stations that dotted the star-swept sphere of humanity's cosmic frontier. The station's purpose in its heyday had been cutting-edge, an advanced hub for research on alien technology. Over time, it bore witness to a swirl of controversies, breakthroughs, and whispered rumors that clung to the walls as if embedded in the bulkheads themselves. Despite the station's storied past, Ethan stepped into its corridors with an open mind. This was his new assignment as a systems engineer, and he intended to make the most of it. He navigated the labyrinth of passages, glancing at the uniform signage. Laboratory wing, hydroponics, energy regulation rooms, and various lock sectors marked with cryptic alien symbols. Now and again, he saw only a fleeting shadow in the distance, some crew member or perhaps an alien researcher. Indeed, Epsilon-7 was no longer manned by humans alone. At present, there was talk that an alien contingent had arrived several years ago under Earth's uneasy alliance with an interstellar coalition. Among these newcomers, he had heard whispers that the most mysterious, some would say formidable, individual was the station's new chief, Saria. Saria, it was rumored, commanded not only the research efforts but also possessed an uncanny ability. Her species, known in remote corners of the galaxy as the Avarian, consumed energy in the most literal sense. They did not eat conventional food, nor did they take sustenance from typical means. Instead, they fed upon raw energy fields, absorbing that intangible force that hummed in the station's power lines and pulsed in unsuspecting organic forms alike. The room where Mill insisted Saria was mesmerizingly imposing, with tall limbs and eyes that flared a deep cobalt whenever she focused intently upon her next source of sustenance. But in truth, Ethan knew precious little. Gossip might be far removed from fact, and he had never set eyes upon an Avarian in person. The sight of a 2-meter-tall being with elongated digits, swaying filament-like hair, and glittering eyes might disconcert some, though Ethan considered himself open-minded. He had arrived early that morning with the singular intention of performing his duties, repairing and maintaining the station's aging systems. Yet in quiet moments, unbidden curiosity sprouted within him. What if the rumors were true? What if the alien chief was as impressive and as dangerous as some claimed? While lost in these contemplations, he found himself at the administrative lounge, a Spartan chamber lined with benches and an array of overhead displays. 2 human officers who were flipping through digital charts paused at his arrival. One was a squat, weary-eyed man in standard station uniform. The other a slender woman wearing the insignia of the Earth Diplomatic Corps. The man glanced up, appraised Ethan with the swift, practiced eye of a soldier used to new arrivals. "You must be Cole, the systems engineer," he said matter-of-factly. "Name's Lieutenant Groves. This is Officer Delgado. We're in charge of orientation, among other things." Ethan managed a polite nod. "That's right, sir. I'm here for the maintenance detail. My specialty is integrated circuit diagnostics, as well as power management for advanced alien tech. My record should be on file." Delgado gave him a slight nod in return. "Yes, I've seen your file. Glad you made it. We were worried your shuttle might be delayed. Epsilon-7 is finicky, if you know what I mean. Systems are fragile and small oversights can lead to big hazards." Groves snorted softly. "We have the best specialists we can get, but some of these systems were developed long ago. Also, you should be aware we have a new head of station, Saria." At that mention, Delgado fixed Ethan with a grave look. "She's not only an exceptional scientist, but she's also bound by a very unusual physiology. You've heard, I presume, that her kind feeds on energy." Ethan nodded. "Yes, just rumors. I don't quite know what to believe." Delgado gave an awkward half-smile. "Believe only what you see. Saria can be intense, but she's fair. Just make certain you don't do anything that might provoke her. She's very strict about station protocols." Delgado's gaze moved to the corridor in a silent signal that the conversation was finished. "Anyway, you'll want to settle in first. Here's a pass to the living quarters. After that, you'll report to the main lab. Saria wants to meet you personally. At the mention of a personal meeting, Ethan felt a small jolt in his stomach. Perhaps it was excitement, or a flicker of apprehension. Thank you, he said quietly, securing the pass. I appreciate the advice. Thus he made his way to a cramped cabin in the living quarters, passing various compartments with old metal doors. The hum of the station's power grid was more pronounced here, like a low-pitched presence that underscored each breath he took. He opened the door to discover a modest bunk, a small desk, and a data console for logging daily updates. The walls were painted a pale shade of green that had likely faded over the decades. Though not luxurious, it was sufficient for an assignment that demanded full focus on station repairs. Soon after unpacking his meager belongings, tools, a few changes of clothing, and a cherished photo of his parents, he headed toward the main laboratory. The route involved the descent through 3 levels connected by narrow lifts, humming tubes that rattled a bit whenever they shifted from one deck to another. On the 3rd deck, the corridors widened, lined with glass observation panels revealing rows of complex devices that glowed with faint luminescence. Alien inscriptions glimmered on the walls, almost as if they had been etched in starlight, and at the far end of the corridor stood a sealed door labeled Main Lab, authorized personnel only. It slid open at his presence, revealing an expansive chamber. The center of the room was dominated by a large apparatus, a tangle of wires, conduits, and rotating rings emitting a subdued azure glow. Tall stacked monitors displayed streams of data. Arrayed along the perimeter were steel tables strewn with half-assembled devices, each bearing strange, otherworldly designs. A group of engineers, both human and alien, crowded around them, exchanging hushed discussions in various tongues. And there at the center stood Saria. She was taller than any human in the room, her posture commanding, yet strangely graceful. The filaments of her hair undulated softly, as if stirred by an unseen cosmic breeze. Her hands, with elongated fingers, hovered above a console. She wore a form-fitting suit made of some glossy dark material that seemed to reflect the faint glow of the apparatus, accentuating her sleek form. When she turned to face him, her eyes glimmered with that rumored cobalt brilliance, though in them he saw not the cruelty some had warned him of, but rather an intense curiosity. Ethan Cole, she pronounced his name almost as if tasting the syllables for the first time. Her voice resonated in a low, fluid tone that somehow felt simultaneously familiar and alien. I have read your credentials. Your expertise in advanced circuit diagnostics is why we requested your transfer here. He cleared his throat, nodding politely. I'm honored to be of service, Commander. She regarded him for a moment, her gaze like a silent probe that sought to delve beneath surface pleasantries. Then she spoke again. Epsilon-7 requires a stable energy supply for the technology we study. Our research focuses on bridging gaps between Earth's technology and artifacts from regions well beyond your solar system. Yet the station systems are temperamental. I trust you will help ensure we don't suffer sudden failures. Yes, Ethan swallowed, feeling the weight of the unspoken warnings from Delgado and Groves. I'll do my utmost, Commander, he said. Let me know what you need. One corner of her mouth, if it could be called that, curved in what might be a small smile. Yet there was an intensity in her cobalt eyes, as though beneath that calm exterior a potent force waited to be unleashed. Your diligence is welcome. We have lost 3 systems engineers in the past year. None could handle the demands for very long. Ethan's stomach lurched. He forced a reply. I'll do my best not to disappoint you, Commander. She gave a slow blink, then turned her attention back to the console. You may begin by running a full diagnostic on that apparatus. She gestured toward the rotating rings. It channels subquantum pulses that my people developed millennia ago. The power fluctuations have recently grown unpredictable, and it could threaten our experiments. I must feed on stable energy flows, not chaotic surges. Her frankness about feeding made Ethan's heart skip a beat. He nodded and approached the apparatus carefully, setting his tool pack on a metal surface. As he tapped the console's control panels, the rings began to spin more rapidly, and faint arcs of light flickered from one ring to the next. Dimly aware of Saria observing him, he ran a thorough check on the system's electromagnetic fields, the damping regulators, and the flux calibrators. It soon became apparent that something was amiss. Minute fluctuations in the apparatus were intensifying over time, likely the result of sabotage or incomplete maintenance. The readouts were spiking in patterns that defied normal usage. He frowned, analyzing the data carefully. He had not expected to find such a serious irregularity on his first day, but it seemed Epsilon-7 was indeed a station of secrets, just as the rumors suggested. Saria, noticing his pensive expression, drifted closer. "What do you see?" He pointed at the readouts. "Commander, these fluctuations aren't random. They follow a pattern, like someone is deliberately adjusting certain field parameters behind the scenes. It could be sabotage, or at least unauthorized tampering. This isn't a simple breakdown." Her cobalt eyes narrowed with a dangerous gleam. "You're certain?" "Relatively so," he replied, maintaining calm. "I'll need to run deeper tests, but it appears that these changes were made recently, possibly in the last few weeks." There was a charged silence. Ethan felt acutely the presence of this powerful being at his side. He could almost sense the faint crackle of energy that emanated from her, as if she could draw it from the apparatus at will. He recalled the caution Delgado had offered. Saria was known to be strict, and if sabotage was discovered, the culprit would face severe consequences. Quietly, she said, "We have had tensions here. Some among the human crew fear the presence of my species. Others blame Earth's administration for conceding too much to the Avarian. It is not inconceivable that someone would attempt sabotage. If they can disrupt my feeding or hamper our experiments, they might hope to drive me away." At that, Ethan felt a pang of empathy. "Commander, if you'll allow me, I'd like to investigate further. We might need to check system logs, see who accessed the apparatus's control panel in the last month." She gave a small nod. "Do so. I appreciate your candor and your competence. Remember, if I am deprived of stable energy, it compromises not only my own well-being, but also the safety of this station. My people design much of this technology to interface with us directly. We cannot afford sabotage." Bowing his head, he returned to the console and initiated the necessary queries. As code scrolled across the screen, a strange spark ignited in him. He was no detective, but the puzzle intrigued him. As for Saria, even though her presence loomed large, there was something in her manner that fascinated him more than it frightened him. She was an alien, yet her voice conveyed a sense of resolve, a zeal not unlike that of a dedicated human commander. And thus began Ethan Cole's first day on Orbital Research Station Epsilon-7, a day that would mark the inception of a strange and potent bond, one that would redefine the boundaries between species, bridging the gulf between human flesh and alien hunger. That evening, after a marathon session of diagnostics and code inspection, Ethan found himself in the station's central mess hall, a small, windowless place where off-duty personnel gathered. The row of tables and chairs was mostly deserted, the overhead lights dimmed in an effort to conserve power, or perhaps to accommodate the nocturnal rhythms of non-human residents. He collected a tray of simple fare, nutrient paste, and a cup of synthetic coffee, and settled at an unoccupied table. He ate in silence, pondering the day's discoveries. The sabotage in the apparatus was subtle but definitely purposeful. Traces of unauthorized access had shown up in the system logs, though the ID signature was scrambled, which suggested not a casual tinkerer but someone with specialized knowledge. Who would risk so much by tampering with Epsilon-7's advanced technology? Was it an insidious plot to expel the alien presence or something more complex? He mused on Saria's demeanor. She was imposing, but not cruel. When she stood at his side, he could feel the air become electric with her presence. Yet her words were measured, logical. Did she suspect him? Unlikely, since he had only just arrived. But she might suspect other humans or possibly even other Avarians. The possibilities swirled through his mind. Interrupting his thoughts, a low hiss signaled someone joining him at the table. Glancing up, Ethan saw a tall figure in a dark uniform. Another Avarian. This one's filaments were tinged with faint silver, and his eyes, while still an otherworldly cobalt, were somewhat milder in their brilliance than Saria. The being lowered himself carefully onto the chair across from Ethan, inclining his elongated head in greeting. "You are the new systems engineer," he said in a quiet, resonant tone. "Ethan Cole, correct?" Ethan offered a cautious nod. "Yes, that's me." "I am called Nara," the Avarian continued, placing a long-fingered hand lightly on the table. "I collaborate with Commander Saria on Zenite research. I have studied some of your Earth languages and can manage a few. English is interesting, though the grammar is perplexing." Ethan raised an eyebrow, intrigued by Nara's frank manner. "Pleased to meet you. Is there something I can help you with?" Nara's gaze flicked to the overhead lights. "I wanted to greet you. We are an isolated group here, especially those of us who rely on Epsilon-7's energy fields for survival. Tensions run high. and new arrivals can shift the balance. You may not fully understand how vital your role is." Ethan frowned slightly. "I'm just here to keep systems running. But after what I saw today, I suspect there's more going on than routine maintenance." "That is an understatement," the alien replied. A faint sigh escaped him, as though speaking of the matter cost him energy. "Commander Saria bears the weight of countless tasks. She must oversee the research, ensure the station's operational integrity, and address the prejudice that some humans harbor toward us. On top of that, her body must feed on stable energy. It is a constant challenge." Ethan remembered the talk of sabotage. "You think the sabotage is directly aimed at Commander Saria's well-being?" Nara paused, eyes narrowing. "Certainly. But sabotage of the apparatus does more than disrupt her feeding. It jeopardizes the entire station's equilibrium. I suspect the saboteur wants more than just to weaken the commander. Perhaps they wish to discredit the entire Avarian presence here. Earth's alliance with us is fragile. Some among your species believe it best to sever ties with ours." Ethan felt a pang of discomfort. Though he had grown up hearing about tensions between Earth and certain alien factions, he never imagined he would be on the front lines of such a dispute. "So what do we do if we can't find the saboteur?" "The system might break down, or worse." Nara nodded, rising from his seat with a smooth, fluid motion. "I believe Commander Saria trusts you. Your insight into these systems could prove decisive. Please remain vigilant. If you notice anything unusual, gather evidence before drawing conclusions. There are those here who may try to manipulate you. Farewell for now." With that, the tall Avarian drifted out of the mess hall, leaving Ethan to his thoughts. The hum of the station felt more oppressive than before. Ethan glanced down at his half-eaten meal, the nutrient paste suddenly unappetizing. He rose from his seat and disposed of his tray, heading back to his cabin with heavy steps. Sleep did not come easily. The artificial night had dimmed the corridors, lending them an eerie quiet. Ethan lay on his bunk, replaying the day's events, his mind abuzz with speculation about sabotage, alliances, and the alien commander's intense presence. At times, the notion that Saria survived by siphoning energy made him uneasy, yet he also felt a pull of curiosity, a desire to understand how such a being functioned. The entire scenario felt like a strange dream, something out of an old serialized sci-fi novel, except he was living it. Eventually, exhaustion claimed him, and he drifted into a restless slumber. Vivid images tumbled through his dreams. Glowing rings spinning out of control, corridors set aflame by surging power lines, and Sirius cobalt eyes watching him from the shadows. When he woke, heart pounding, the station's morning cycle had already begun. A dull ache resonated in his shoulders, but he forced himself to his feet. Today there would be no respite. The sabotage must be investigated, or the entire station might face catastrophe. Over the next several days, Ethan tirelessly combed through security logs, diagnostic reports, and archived data. He teamed up with a small group of technicians, both human and Avarian, trying to reconstruct the steps that led to the tampering. With each passing hour, he gained deeper insight into how the station's power grid functioned, how the subquantum apparatus channeled specialized energy, and how that energy was partially diverted to meet Siria's unique requirements. The complexities were staggering. In rare moments when Saria appeared at his side, he felt a potent tension surge through him. She would inquire about his progress in clipped, direct phrases, her tall figure looming with regal poise. At times he glimpsed the faint arcs of energy dancing around her fingertips, as though she were unconsciously drawing power from the environment. Her gaze never lingered too long, but he sensed that she was studying him, measuring how far she could trust him. Curiously, Ethan discovered something unexpected in the logs. An emergent pattern that suggested the sabotage went deeper than a mere single act of tampering. Over the past months, subtle alterations to system protocols had taken place. Some modifications were trivial, others more insidious. They all led to one conclusion. Someone had been systematically weakening the station from within. The sabotage to the apparatus was only the latest step in a longer game. He brought these findings to Saria in a private briefing. They met in her personal workspace, a smaller chamber adjacent to the main lab. Soft, pulsating lights framed the walls, giving the room a serene but otherworldly ambience. The hum of the station's power lines was subdued here, as if out of respect for the commander's presence. She listened intently as Ethan shared the collected data, her cobalt eyes narrowing at the potential implications. "So the sabotage started long before my arrival," Ethan concluded, his voice quiet yet firm. "It's not random. The manipulations appear methodical, aiming to create a cascade failure eventually. Saria's elongated fingers trace the edges of a glowing data tablet. And if the station systems collapse altogether, it would force a full evacuation. Her voice seemed distant. The Avarian station here rely on a stable energy environment. A meltdown would be disastrous to us and to the Alliance itself. Ethan set his jaw. Could it be a group of conspirators? Perhaps they want Earth to relinquish the station. Saria tilted her head in consideration. Possibly, or a lone operative with a personal vendetta. I cannot say for certain yet, but you have done well to uncover these patterns. It confirms that we must act quickly to secure the station. The sharp tone of her voice roused a swirl of emotions in Ethan. He took a breath. Commander, if we're going to root out the culprit, we need more than just remote locks. We need to set up a trap, or at least monitor the key junctions physically. Your presence might be the main target. Her gaze flicked up, and for a moment, Ethan felt a jolt, as though he had stepped too far. But then her expression softened, if only slightly. Your diligence is commendable. You speak truth. This goes beyond personal hunger. If we are to maintain this station, we must rid ourselves of the saboteur. You have my permission to do whatever you deem necessary to safeguard the apparatus and the power grid. Report to me directly with all findings. He let out a small sigh of relief. Thank you, Commander. I'll see to it immediately. In the days that followed, he hardly slept. Alongside a handful of trusted crew, Ethan installed new sensors near the main power conduits. He set up hidden loggers and subroutines in the station's master computer. He also recruited Nera and a small group of Avarians who possessed keen energy senses, hoping they might detect abnormal fluxes or shifts whenever the saboteur attempted another intrusion. His cabin became a second command center, cluttered with data disks and half-finished mugs of coffee. Each day brought them closer to an answer, but the suspense was palpable, like the station itself was holding its breath. Late one night, as he was reviewing a fresh cluster of data, he felt a faint presence outside his door. The sensor beeped softly, indicating someone had approached. Rising, he opened the door to find none other than Saria standing there, a towering silhouette in the dim corridor. Her expression was unreadable, yet the cobalt glow in her eyes seemed subdued, almost pensive. Commander, he managed, stepping aside to let her enter. Is everything all right? She moved inside with a measured grace, her gaze flicking over the clutter of data pads and glowing monitors. I could ask the same of you. You've scarcely slept in the past few rotations. He ran a hand through his hair. Just trying to crack this sabotage. We're close, but the intruder is cunning. They cover their tracks well. She nodded, silent for a moment. There was a certain tension in the air, as though something unspoken lingered. Ethan, she said at last, her voice lower than usual. I must speak plainly. My energy reserves are waning. The sabotage has compromised the station's subquantum field, making it increasingly difficult to draw stable energy. My hunger grows, and not just for the apparatus's output. His pulse quickened at her candid admission. Is there a way to compensate? Surely we can reroute some auxiliary power to your quarters. She exhaled, and a faint crackle of energy flickered around her fingertips. It is not that simple. My species feeds best when the energy resonates in harmony with our own biological frequencies. The apparatus provided that, but the sabotage has introduced distortion into the system. If it goes on too long, I may succumb to a primal hunger. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. He recalled the stories he had heard of Avarians draining energy directly from living creatures when driven to desperation. Commander, we'll fix it, he said earnestly. We'll find the culprit, restore the apparatus. She raised a hand, her elongated fingers nearly brushing his shoulder. Ethan, you are uniquely attuned to the system's frequencies. I sense it when you calibrate the apparatus. Your presence alone steadies the field. Already I have felt a faint echo of energy in you that resonates with Avarian frequencies. It is unusual in humans. He swallowed hard, trying to parse the implications of her words. But I'm just running diagnostics. Maybe it's a side effect of the equipment or my familiarity with alien tech. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. Possibly, or there may be more to your natural predispositions. I came here tonight to ask if you would willingly offer me a portion of your energy. I would not force it upon you, but if you consent, I can form a controlled circuit, drawing only what I need to sustain myself until the apparatus is fully repaired. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. The idea of letting an alien feed on his energy carried a primal fear, and yet, looking into her cobalt eyes, he found no malice there, only vulnerability and necessity. He took a shaky breath. Commander, if it helps you, I'll do it. Just promise me it's safe. Her lips curved into a subdued smile. I will be gentle, I vow it. She guided him to a chair, and he sat, uncertain. She then placed her palms lightly on his temples, her elongated fingers spanning across his hair. A subtle tingling coursed through him, as though a warm current of electricity danced along his nerves. Her cobalt eyes glowed more intensely, and he sensed a gentle pull, not painful, just surreal. The air thickened, and his surroundings blurred at the edges of his vision. Gradually, the tingle spread to his chest, his arms, and an unspoken connection formed between them, a circuit bridging human and Avarian physiology. He felt a slight drain, like giving blood, but also a surge of something akin to euphoria. Saria inhaled softly, as if savoring a much-needed breath of oxygen after a near drowning. The entire exchange lasted no more than a minute, yet it felt both timeless and intimate. When she pulled back, Ethan took a moment to steady himself. He was left with mild fatigue, but he also felt an odd sense of clarity, as though some hidden dimension had opened between them. Saria's shoulders relaxed, her face showing the faintest hint of relief. Thank you, she breathed. This shall sustain me for a time. I regret imposing on you. He blinked, shaking off a lingering haze. You're welcome, I think. It's strange, but I'm all right. She gave him a grateful nod, then turned to leave, only pausing at the door. Your willingness to assist me will not be forgotten. And with that, she slipped out into the corridor, leaving Ethan alone with a whirlwind of thoughts and a newly discovered connection that defied everything he thought he knew about the boundaries of species. In the aftermath, Ethan found his concentration sharpening. His work on the sabotage progressed in leaps and bounds, as though that brief exchange with Saria had awakened an instinct. He noticed subtle correlations in the data logs, angles he had overlooked before. By the station's next morning cycle, he had compiled enough clues to strongly suspect that the saboteur was among the human staff who specialized in station maintenance, a cunning individual who accessed hidden compartments to tamper with code physically. Despite his resolve, he couldn't shake the feeling that his new bond with Saria carried an unspoken weight, but part of him wondered if it was purely physiological, a transaction of energy that had awakened dormant capacities within him. Or was it something else, a deeper link that transcended mere logic? He dismissed such musings as best he could, focusing instead on the looming danger that threatened them all. That day, he spoke with Lieutenant Groves, presenting his findings and requesting additional security around the main power conduits. The lieutenant furrowed his brow, but ultimately agreed. Delgado, too, seemed concerned, though her expressions betrayed a hint of doubt. Maybe she suspected Ethan's closeness to Saria was coloring his judgment. If so, Ethan kept his silence. The less said about how Saria fed, the better. Still, no immediate culprit emerged. The saboteur operated deftly, avoiding the newly installed sensors and leaving only faint traces. The atmosphere around the station grew tense, each day overshadowed by the possibility of a catastrophic meltdown. Some of the human staff grumbled openly, complaining about the Avarians and the dangerous technology they brought. Others carried on their duties in stony silence. The Avarians, for their part, grew more reticent, spending longer hours in the designated alien quarters. Nara remained cordial toward Ethan, though even he seemed troubled, as if aware that the entire alliance hung by a thread. Then came the incident that changed everything. Late one cycle, an alarm blared through the corridors, echoing with urgent shrieks. Racing to the source, Ethan found the subquantum apparatus in a state of near overload. Arcs of crackling energy leaped wildly from the rotating rings, scorching the walls and scattering equipment. The lab's monitors flashed bright red warnings. Containment breach imminent. Engineers scrambled in panic, some shouting, others ducking behind protective barriers. Over the din, Ethan glimpsed Saria at the heart of the chaos, her form illuminated by furious streams of electricity. Her eyes glowed, straining to absorb the raging energy, but it was too much for one being to handle. She staggered, nearly collapsing under the brutal torrent of raw power. Without hesitation, Ethan rushed forward, ignoring the searing heat that radiated from the swirling arcs. His hands flew across a scorched console, inputting emergency shut-off commands. The system refused to respond. Someone had locked it down with an override code. The sabotage was manifesting in full force, aimed at unleashing a meltdown that would destroy them all. Saria caught sight of him and cried out, "Stay back. The field is unstable." He set his jaw. "We have no choice. I have to stop it from here." Her elongated fingers clenched as she desperately attempted to stave off enough power to stabilize the rings. Hurry. With frantic keystrokes, Ethan attempted to bypass the override. Sparks showered him, burning small holes in his uniform, but he pressed on. In that moment of crisis, he felt the surge of foreign strength, an echo of the bond he shared with Saria. He sensed the machine's rhythms, like a second heartbeat spiking wildly. Summoning a clarity he scarcely understood, he typed in a manual reroute sequence, forcing the runaway energy into backup capacitors. The apparatus whirled, howling as if in protest. For a split second, Ethan feared it was too late. Then, with a violent jolt, the spinning rings slowed, and the arcs of lightning ebbed. Alarms still blared, but the meltdown was averted. Saria sank to one knee, her hair filaments twitching erratically. The sudden drop in raw energy left her trembling. Ethan rushed to her side, kneeling down, ignoring the acrid smoke that burned his nostrils. "Commander, stay with me," he gasped, pressing a hand to her shoulder. "Are you all right?" She looked up, her cobalt eyes flickering. I am weakened." Despite her obvious strain, she managed a faint smile. "But alive. You did it." Before Ethan could reply, Lieutenant Groves and several security officers burst into the lab, weapons drawn. The scene before them was chaotic. Burnt console panels, charred floors, scattered tools. Then, stepping out from behind one of the support structures, brandishing a small handheld device, was a wiry man Ethan recognized as a technician named Concade. The device looked suspiciously like a remote hacking module. His expression was twisted with a mix of rage and triumph. "You meddling fools," Concade spat. "I tried, don't you see? These aliens threaten everything we stand for. They mean to subvert Earth and slave us with their energy demands." Ethan scrambled to his feet, fury and relief clashing within him. "Concade, drop that device. You nearly destroyed the station." Concade sneered, waving the device threateningly. "You're a traitor, Cole. You're letting the creature feed on us, manipulate our technology. I won't let Earth fall to them." He pressed a button on the device, and overhead lights began to flicker ominously. A new alarm wailed. Groves barked an order for Concade to surrender, but the deranged technician sprinted along the walkway, trying to reach another control panel that presumably housed a final sabotage command. Security officers rushed after him. A quick scuffle ensued. A bright flash lit the chamber as the device short-circuited in Concade's hand. Sparks flew, and he let out a cry of pain. The officers subdued him, forcing him to the ground. The immediate threat was neutralized. Ethan slid down beside Saria again, exhaling a shaky breath. The meltdown was stopped, Concade apprehended, but the damage was severe. Half the apparatus was fried, and Saria's energy reserves seemed dangerously